This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Three nasty farmers, one clever fox, and lots of planimetric symmetrical shots. It's Fantastic Mr. Fox, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. As we have mentioned, but as you know, we wrapped up the Lord of the Rings series and we're moving back into regularly scheduled programming. Getting back to a children's book this week with a Roald Dahl feature, The Fantastic Mr. Fox. We had a bunch of heavy reading over the past couple months, so we decided to go with something a little lighter.
Yeah, it was nice to have something that I could read in like an afternoon.
Yeah.
Unlike any of the Lord of the Rings books.
Yeah. So we have most of our normal segments. We're going to start with Let Me Sum Up. We don't have a guess who in this one because of the nature of the book, I would assume.
There are descriptions of the farmers, but they're like verbatim
from the
movies, so I thought that seemed pointless.
Be a little redundant. But
I also didn't want to try to make you remember which farmers
I would not remember
which. I know.
Which was which. I would
it seems unfair.
Yeah. But anyway, so we're going to get into our first segment. Let me sum up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
What is the book Fantastic Mr. Fox about?
All right. Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl. Mr. Fox lives in a hole under a tree with his wife and children. Every night, he steals their supper from one of the three local farmers who are famous for being mean and stupid. Eventually, the farmers figure out where Mr. Fox lives. They try to shoot him, and when that fails, they try to dig him out. But Mr. Fox and his family can dig faster and get away. Deep underground, they meet other animals who are trapped in the tunnels due to the farmers' fanatical murder mission. Mr. Fox realizes that they can all burrow up directly underneath the farms and get more than enough food, so that's what they do. Everyone decides to stay underground forever, and the farmers are left standing around the hole they made, telling themselves that Mr. Fox will come out any minute now.
All right, so that was the book. The movie I'll try to do briefly. It's not very complicated. Mr. Fox is a fox who lives in a hole under a tree with his family. Although initially in the prologue of the film, the cold open, he doesn't have a family. We're introduced to him as a fox thief with his wife. He finds out she's pregnant, and then he tells him he has to get a different job. He settles down as a newspaper writer. They have a son, and they have a family. But the fox can't outgrow his old ways, decides to get back into thieving, especially after they buy a new house, because he wants to move out from underground. He has these dreams and these notions of living above ground and being more than his father was in terms of, not being so poor and that sort of thing. So he wants to move above ground. He buys a house with apparently the money that they had. I don't understand. It's a small detail, but I was like, they just said how poor they were, and then they buy this big fancy house that I guess it's because it's in a bad part of town because it's right across from the farmers. I don't know. Don't know how they afforded it. Doesn't matter. They buy a house now. They're living in a tree, above ground kind of, or whatever. But he wants to thieve things because he just does. And so he does. He moves in across from these farmers, and he goes on a robbing spree with his friend, the mole, named Kylie, I believe. And they rob all these guys. Eventually, one of the last ones they rob, he ends up getting shot. His tail gets knocked off. He ends up hiding underground, but then the farmers in the town or whatever all like rally around to try to exterminate the creatures under the ground, particularly a fox. And so there's some hijinks with that, with them flooding their holes that they're in. Basically, the fox's greed for or desire to live his old thieving life has now put the entire community of animals in jeopardy, and they have to band together, use their various strengths to help defeat the farmers. Kind of. I think they basically just find some sewers to live in underneath the farmers, even though they were already in tunnels under this. I don't know. I didn't like this movie, but we'll get to that. It just did nothing for me, but which maybe that'll be controversial. I don't know. But so they end up finding some sewers to live in, and the moral of the story is live in sewers. The end. I don't get this movie, but we'll get to that. We don't have a Guess Who, so let's move right in to Was That in the Book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
All right, Katie, I have questions.
Yes, you do.
I don't know how many of these will be good questions, but I had them. I want to preface this again by saying this movie did very little for me. I don't know why. I was expecting to quite enjoy it, and I've liked a fair number of Wes Anderson's movies, but this one did almost nothing for me in any way other than it looked kind of neat. But we'll talk about that more. So there's stuff that I may ask that I don't know. I don't know how to get into this. We'll just go into the questions. I was really disappointed by this overall as an experience. Is the fox a former chicken thief, current newspaper writer who has aspirations of leaving his humble hole in the ground?
No. He is a fox who steals chickens and other livestock because he is a fox. He also wears a little vest and a jacket in the book, but that's because it's a kid's book.
Okay.
So
he doesn't, because that felt like this was part of the message in the movie, but I couldn't parse what the message was.
Yeah, I had a similar
with
issue.
This particular thing of like, he's this fox who wants to, they're poor but they're happy, but he wants to move to a nicer place above ground, but at the same time that he wants to overcome sort of his foxness by living in holes in the ground, because she says that's what foxes do. He also is unable to escape his fox nature to hunt and steal chickens or whatever, even though he's been doing that the whole time. But he doesn't seem I was very confused at what this message was of, I want to be more than the sort of fox living in a hole thing. Like, we can be better than that. We can live above ground in a nice house and not be poor. But also, while this is all going on, he just seemingly reverts back to his fox-like nature of stealing chickens that he decided he would stop doing when he started a family, but now he reverts back to that because it's just in his nature. But he's also actively defying his nature of living in a hole in the ground by moving above ground. But also, is the message of this movie, don't try to be something you're not, or is it do being that thing that you were that was bad is bad? Okay, let me try. I don't get this movie, and I hated it. I didn't hate it. It made me. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have cursed because it's a kids episode. Maybe this movie made me really like nothing, and it just was really annoying because I expected it to be so much more than it was for me. It did nothing for me, and I don't understand it. I just don't get what the point of the movie is.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I got derailed right away, but I just don't understand the point of the movie. It was so frustrating because I felt like I should be getting something heartwarming and like it shouldn't be a complicated message because it's a kids movie basically. But I felt like the message just was a mess and I didn't understand it, and I was frustrated that I didn't get what the movie was trying to tell us, and because it should be obvious because it's for kids.
Okay, here's what I think. I agree with you. I think the messaging is a mess. I don't think that's on you, though.
I know. Okay, good. Because it felt like it was, because I felt like it should be easy and obvious, or I don't know. And maybe there's not a message in the book, so
There's
like
not really.
okay,
There's not.
or like not a. You don't think there's an overt message in the book?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And the movie, I think, maybe tried to kind of like copy paste in a message, but it wasn't very good at like either deciding exactly what it wanted that message to be, and or it couldn't quite get like the through lines that it needed in order to have a payoff for like a message or a theme.
Here, let me try to suss this down real. I think I figured out what drove me crazy about at least some of the messaging is that and I tried to explain this and I failed once already, but I'm going to try again real quick. We have simultaneously this thing going on where he's happy as a poor fox living in a hole, and ultimately, and that story and his wife's like, no, we're happy living in the hole. We don't need to live above ground and be different. We can just be happy foxes living in holes. And he's like, no, I want more than that. And then, but at the end of the story, that storyline wraps up with them just being happy living underground in holes together as animals, and they have each other and they're happy. They're not particularly rich, but they kind of are because of the grocery store, but whatever. So that's the story. Seems to be his aspirations of moving above ground are potentially wrong or headed. And so they end up not moving above, so that they end up still living underground. And look, we can just be happy together. We don't need riches or whatever. But then also, so that's him. So the message there is know your role, stay in your lane, right? Or not stay in your lane so much as wealth isn't everything, that sort of message. The sort of nature of living in the hole in the ground, being what foxes do, is fine and works out for them. But then also we have this storyline of the whole reason all of these terrible things happen to everybody is because the fox falls into his nature of being a fox and hunting chickens and stealing chickens and pestering these farmers, and that his actions of doing that cause all sorts of mayhem for everybody, and he has to learn to not be so selfish. But those almost seem like they're running contradictory to each other in my head. Those two themes almost seem contradictory. Now, I guess you could argue that the message is that his sort of selfish need to do whatever he wanted, of which in one hand is move above ground and live in a tree, and on the other hand is to be more like a fox and hunt chickens. I guess the message is that don't be selfish or something. I don't know.
Maybe.
I felt similarly to how I felt watching Spirited Away, which I know that movie's considered, and I want to watch it again, but that movie did very little for me because I didn't get it. I felt like, what is the message here? And maybe there's not a message, but it felt like, and now again, I need to rewatch that one for sure. Maybe I wasn't in the right frame of mind when we watched it. I don't know. But it felt similar to that, in that it's this kid's movie that seems like it should have a nice. I'm a sucker for these types of stories. I love Kubo. I love that have a sort of simple message that is well told and that kids can watch and get something out of. I enjoy those kind of movies. And I felt so infuriated watching this movie. I don't know. I'm sorry. We need to. I probably should have talked about this all later, but I had to get it.
I can tell that you were not on board with this one.
And I wanted to, I fully went into this movie expecting to find it delightful. And I didn't even laugh that much. I laughed a few times. I expected to find it delightful and heartwarming. I didn't care about any of the characters particularly. I couldn't find myself, especially like George Clooney's character, the fox. He's just a jerk. Like a selfish jerk, and he kind of learns to be a bit less of a selfish jerk at the end, and hooray. And I don't know if it was the animation style or what, but I cried during Kubo 3 times when we saw it in theaters. This movie did nothing for me. I didn't even get close to having an emotional reaction at all. And I don't know. It was weird. It was a weird experience because, again, I went in fully expecting to thoroughly enjoy and love this movie, and it's got great reviews. It's got 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. And we heard from quite a few people who were really excited to hear us talk about this.
Yeah, and that's why I feel bad. But I know
I feel bad too because
It just did
much
nothing
for
me. And I'm like wondering what I missed or what happened. Again, it's fantastic to look at. Like it looks like a Wes Anderson movie. So, in terms of like the style, other than the stop motion animation. But, it's cool to look at. It's a clever visual stuff going on, and it's really neat. But, like, story-wise, did nothing. I don't know. Yeah. All right, let's move on. And I'm sure we'll talk about it more. But
Yep.
Yeah. Are there 3 evil farmers, and do they each have their own thing that they eat?
Yes, that is all the same from the book.
So there's one that eats donuts, one
Stuffed
that eats
with pate, yes.
stuff with pate. There's one that eats 12
like
chickens
12
a day.
chickens a day, yeah.
There's one that drinks the
cider,
apple cider.
Yep.
Cool. Is the book like a heist story? Now the whole movie's not a heist story, but like the first act, the second act, kind of. It's like a heist story with Heisty with George Clooney narrating heists, which is fun because it's Ocean's 11.
Clooney, yeah.
Well, and it's very reminiscent of him in Ocean's 11 narrating the heist scenes and stuff. And very clearly one of the reasons they cast George Clooney. But is that what goes on in the book? Is there like the heisty stealing of chicken scenes?
I would say no. The book does evolve into like a sort of plot to steal a bunch of the farmer's goods, kind of. But I wouldn't call it a heist because we don't have that kind of like heist format of like planning it out ahead of time. And here we have our demolitions expert and our acrobat and whatever else you have for a heist.
Which
I haven't seen enough heist
particularly
movies.
do in
they do that a little bit. At the end.
And that's less of a height. Yeah, but yes.
But the movie, I think, kind of takes that tiny little kernel of an idea of there could be a heist and just like dials it up and really leans into it.
Okay. Is there a subplot where Christopherson, who's like the nephew of the fox and his wife, comes to stay with them, and it's this whole jealousy thing? Because Fox's son, Ash, is super jealous because his dad doesn't particularly isn't particularly like proud of him because he's not like traditionally athletic or any of those sorts of things. But whereas Christopherson is, and so there's this sort of B plot in the movie about a father learning to like love his son and respect him for his own skills and that sort of thing, which was like the best part of the movie to me. But is that from the book, that subplot?
No. The foxes have 4 kits, but none of them are named.
Okay, and nobody comes. Their cousin doesn't.
Nobody
come
comes to visit.
Is there any sort of subplot at all with the sort of interpersonal relationships between the fox and his kids?
No.
Okay, all right. Whack Bat. The game Whack Bat, which was a fun scene in the movie. Is that in the book where they play the game Whack Bat and quirkily explain the rules?
No, it's not from the book.
Okay. Because that then ruins the second part. The second part, I wanted to know if there was a drawing that said home versus stray on the scoreboard, because I thought that was clever. I enjoyed that.
There is not, but I enjoyed that as well.
Yeah.
Like a cute detail.
Does Fox get his tail shot off by the farmers upon stealing some stuff and trying to escape?
Yes, that is directly from the book. They shoot off his tail.
Is that like, okay.
It happens on like page 5.
Oh. All right. Fair enough. Do they then, after that moment, have to create some sort of underground refugee camp to hide from the farmers after the farmers go to war against the fox / all the animals?
Yeah, sort of. I don't know if I would call it a refugee camp like they showed in the movie. But they do, like, they end up underground and then they run into a bunch of other, like, forest creatures who have also been trapped underground because of this. Okay.
And in the book, is it all, like, is it the fox's fault that that the farmers are now causing issues for all of these? Well, if you had to, I guess this is my question. If you had to, like, I know you said there's not like an overt message, but there's got to be some sort of subtle message to the story about something. it's a kid's book. There has to be, right? So like what I would think, maybe there's not, but
Honestly, I wouldn't say that there is.
really,
Really.
that's astonishing.
It's
to
a
me.
very sparse, very simple story about a clever fox who pulls one over on these 3 farmers by being more clever than they are.
And so he steals a bunch of stuff, or he steals chickens or whatever, and then they start going after him. And then
they all end up underground. And then he's like, okay, the scene in the movie where they burrow up into all of the individual farmers' storehouses and then they go back and they're all going to have a feast.
Yeah.
That's where the book ends.
Oh, okay. So, there isn't particularly...
there's not particularly a message.
They just burrow in... Okay.
Like... there's not really a message. There's not really a moral. If I was going to teach this book, I would probably pull in some kind of let's have a philosophical discussion about stealing. And we know that stealing's wrong, but why is it okay in this context of this story?
Right.
But there's not a moral message about that.
Okay. So, but does the book establish at all the farmers because I felt like the movie didn't do this, and I could be wrong. I mean, there's a little bit of an allusion to it, but does the book imply at all that the farmers are encroaching their lands and their resources are scarce because of the farmers or something? Because
No.
I didn't really get that feeling in the movie, which was what would have made me feel like things made more I would have at least been able to draw a little bit of something out of that about industrialization or
I think that could have been an interesting
conservation
route
and
to
that
go
sort
with
of
it,
thing.
yeah. But that's not in the book.
But it just seems like the animals are living their own fine lives and the farmers are doing their own thing, and it doesn't seem to be that impacting each other very much in a way that is interesting to me in the movie. And
Well, here's where I think maybe it works a little better in the book. We're totally off the rails from our usual segments here, but that's okay.
I don't know.
So in the movie, he moves into that neighborhood and just randomly starts stealing from these 3 farmers. In the book, he's been at this forever.
Okay.
He's been stealing from them consistently.
Right. Yeah.
For years.
Gotcha. Okay. But so that still doesn't really. Authors write stories that matter. That's my. I don't know. I don't know.
Can we not give Roald Dahl this one gimme?
Yeah, sure.
He's got a lot of other books with messages.
I didn't read it, so I don't know. And then that's fine. If I guess. And you know what? Maybe I was coming into it the wrong way, expecting something interesting. No, and I mean that in a way of maybe I came into it when I came into it expecting Kubo and the Two Strings or Mary and Max, which have so much to say about life and death and all these interesting topics, and they make you think, and they're incredibly emotionally moving. And I was expecting that, and I felt like I got the worst Wes Anderson movie that I've seen. In terms of saying anything. And Wes Anderson movies, to be fair, aren't particularly the masters of or masterpieces of moral storytelling or that's not really what Wes Anderson tends to be about. But I've always felt like I've been able to get something out of the movies more than in this one, which again, the only storyline that really meant and felt like it did anything emotionally for me was the father-son cousin or whatever storyline that felt like it had at least some initial setup, rising character growth and resolution and that sort of thing. I don't think it was all perfect, but I felt like at least there was something there. Whereas the rest of the plot, I felt like was just watching things happen, and I didn't care because I felt no attachment in terms of what does this all mean? What are we trying to say about society or about this world that they live in? It just felt like these things happened and where you can derive any sort of meaning from the story in the movie, I felt like it was the message at the end of the movie was literally be happy living underground and kind of being poor or something.
Like, be happy with what you have.
Be happy with what you have, which is a weird, I don't think particularly good message anyways. But again, it's not be happy with what you have, because what they have in that they end up living in the sewers, but then they go up and steal from the grocery store, this like bountiful heavenly grocery store that has everything they could ever want. They can go up there and steal from it. So I just didn't. Somebody write me. Somebody explain to me what this movie's supposed to mean or why it's supposed to matter. I want to, and I don't mean that negatively. I would love to know what I missed. Like if somebody could come succinctly kind of explain what I missed about this movie, because I felt like I missed something. I don't know. Anyways, this line in the movie is a weird line that is not resolved, I feel like, in any way whatsoever. Right? Well, so at one point in the movie, in sort of the Fox and his wife are kind of arguing about stuff, and she says to him, "I love you too, but I shouldn't have married you." Now I assume that line's not in the book.
It's not.
Am I crazy that line in the movie does not get resolved in any meaningful way?
No, it doesn't.
Because that felt like I was like, ooh, this could be an interesting thing that goes somewhere. About people maybe just not being right for each other or something, but they just end up together at the end and they're fine. Yeah. Right? No, that's how it ends, right?
Yeah.
So what was the point of that? That was I was like, ooh, movie, maybe gonna give me something interesting here. She's like, I love you, but I shouldn't have married you. Are we gonna explore this in some way? And then I felt like it didn't explore it. And I was like, okay.
I don't know. And it kind of does make me wonder, like, how many writers actually worked on this.
Apparently it was only like two. It was Wes Anderson and I can't remember, Noah something was the other screenwriter. I don't know.
Because I do think, having read the book, I do think that maybe it would be a little bit difficult to flesh out in a way that is meaningful or interesting. And I think maybe in some aspects they did what they could.
Yeah, I want to stress, I didn't hate the movie. I guess I kind of did in the sense of like, I hate what based on my expectations, I hated it, but I didn't hate the movie. Like overall, watching it was like a fine experience. Like I didn't hate the act of sitting through it, but I just sitting back and reflecting on it and then thinking about it after we got done watching it, the more and more I thought on it, I was like, I felt like I just didn't get anything out of it, which was really disappointing because I fully expected to. And that's one of those lines where it's like, that was an interesting thing in the moment to me in the movie that could be done, that could go down an interesting avenue. And I felt like it just didn't go anywhere. And then it was, again, they just end up together and in love and fine at the end of the movie. And she's pregnant again. And so they're happy. But I don't know. Anyways, moving on.
I don't know.
The evil snapping security rat that works for the farmers. In the book, he's played by, or in the movie, he's played by, somebody really weird. It's not Christopher Walken, but it's somebody like that. Anyways, that rat, the security rat.
The security rat. They do meet an evil and drunk rat when they steal cider in the book, but he doesn't work for Bean, the farmer, nor does he snap.
Okay, because he snaps a lot in the movie. Also on that note, does he die in the book?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay. All right. Then we get this line in the movie. As they're down in the bottom underneath in the sewers, and they're deciding that they're going to fight back or something against the farmers. And and Fox says, "You know what? All of our differences make us special and stronger." And was this in the book, that line or that message? And now we talked about that, probably not, because you said there was no overt message like that in the movie or in the book. But in the movie, I felt like this line kind of came out of nowhere. Not came out of nowhere, but it felt like this message wasn't built to in any meaningful way.
Right. Well, it did feel like a little bit like they were trying to squeeze in a message at the very end without having built the through lines.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe they tried to build that through line with his son.
Yeah, that was the
And,
goal,
like,
I think, for sure.
like feeling like he was different. But the problem that I had with it was that it wasn't really demonstrated that he was very different.
I agree completely.
He just kind of seemed like an awkward kid.
A kind of an awkward kid. I agreed completely that their whole, like, you're different and their hand emotion thing that they did. I was like, well, we're not seeing all these ways that he's different. Like, he's not particularly good at sports.
But okay, a lot of people aren't.
Most people, a lot of people aren't. And he's not, but that's like it. And he's kind of quiet, maybe?
He's kind of like quiet. Like, the strangest thing about him was that he's in his underwear all the time.
Yeah, and he wears a cape. Like, and like, sometimes, but like and now I don't know if they were going, I don't know what they were going for necessarily specifically there, but it did feel like they didn't do a good job demonstrating to us of him being this like completely unique.
He came off to me as just like kind of an awkward kid, and maybe it would have helped to know like how old he was supposed to be.
Yeah,
but like in relation to like human years.
Right. Maybe that. Cool, because they say 2 years later and it's 12, so he's supposed to be like 12.
Like 12?
Because they say like 12
I feel
Fox
like that's
years.
still well within the realm of like, you're just an awkward kid.
Yeah. I felt the same thing, because I think they said 12 Fox years when they said 2 years later. I think you're right, yeah. But yeah, he just seemed kind of like an awkward kid, and I just didn't see, because I guess they maybe didn't express to me what his skills were that his dad was overlooking anyways.
Well, and
or something.
The big problem, the big moment where we were supposed to see him being different and like that paying off for him was when he gets his cousin out of the cage.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get him out of the cage because he has like some kind of talent or skill or whatever, or some kind of like different thing that makes him special and stronger.
Yeah.
He just messes up the karate kick and the cage falls.
Yeah. Well, and he also, there's a moment, and it's a fun moment, and I like it. And there's elements of this paying off, like, and he talks about there's a moment where he can get into some place because he's small, and he has that moment where the camera pans up, he goes, "'Cause I'm small," or whatever. And it's kind of a fun, like, cute moment. But I think they just didn't do a good enough job setting up this moment in the movie. And maybe even I think it just needed a more diverse setup with more characters, or we needed to see some sort of strife within the world about the differences between the animals, a la Zootopia or something. That's the message of Zootopia, is is that Judy Hopps or whatever.
Right. We're all different.
We're all different, but we can all
work together, and our differences mean that we can accomplish more things.
And Zootopia does it beautifully and like really well. And this movie just kind of like gives us that message at the end. And I just want to go watch Zootopia like 8 times instead of this movie. But Zootopia is an infinitely better movie than this one.
So do I know what your movie rec is going to be?
That's a true, straight up, that's the movie rec. If you want that message of like animals, we're all different, but see, Zootopia comments on so much stuff though. This movie comments on nothing. It comments on nothing. Like I was trying to like figure out if there was some sort of interesting like leftist reading of it of them as workers, but it doesn't. I don't think it adds up. I was trying to delve into my head and find something that worked, and again, maybe I'm just missing it, but I couldn't find any interesting commentary.
I don't know if there's anything there to see.
Well, if that's the case, that's the most privileged bullshit. Perfectly encapsulates Wes Anderson, honestly, as a filmmaker, to just not comment on anything interesting in your movie about like differences and power struggles between. I don't know. I just felt like there was Go watch Zootopia. That movie has something to say. I mean, it's corporate overlord, art, but it at least has something to say.
Yeah.
Anyways. Do the animals firebomb the city?
They do not.
That was interesting. They just start burning down the city that they live under.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why, because I thought just the farmers were the problem, but they just start lighting like the baker's house on like his bakery shop on fire and stuff. And I was like, okay, maybe we're going to go somewhere interesting with this, but they just put out the fires and move on. I thought maybe there was going to be something going on about like taking out their aggression on the wrong people. I don't even know. I was hoping for something in this movie, and they never gave me anything, I feel like. But the wolf encounter, that was weird. What was that about? At the end of this movie...
I have that in, I don't know. I have that in another...
The whole fox... The fox has been mentioned that he's scared of wolves throughout the course of the movie. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the movie, they see a wolf on the hill, and they have like a moment, and then they just move on. And the fox says something about good luck on your trap. I don't know. He says something like he's over his fear of wolves or whatever.
Yeah.
Again, I don't understand what about his journey has led him to that. But
I don't know.
But sure.
It's not in the book.
It's not in the book? Okay. The whole wolf moment's not in the book? Okay. It also made me wonder if that was like some weird like super... Because I have not seen Isle of Dogs. Mm-hmm. But it's Wes Anderson. And I think... Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the same style stop motion that this movie is, and I was like, is that like an Isle of Dogs prequel, like the Nick Fury moment? And is that what's going on here with the wolf? And is he gonna go live on the Isle of Dogs or something? Again, I haven't seen that movie, so I don't know. Eventually, the fox does get his blown off tail back. That's a whole big plot element. Is that the kid, his son, is gonna go try to get the tail back, and they end up getting captured, and then they all have to go save Christopherson, who got captured, trying to help get the tail back. But ultimately, they save Christopherson, and they do get the tail back. And then he attaches it to, like, he has some sort of clasp mechanism that pins it to his pants, and he wears his old tail on his pants.
That is not in the book.
It's not in the book? Okay, that was weird.
That was pretty weird, yeah.
That was weird. I mean, it's kind of I think what it is that this movie felt a lot like all of the worst parts of Wes Anderson in terms of, like, quirky for quirkiness sake. And maybe it's more maybe it's that all works better in a medium where we have physical real people on screen, and they can like emote and do like interesting things that feel like it, and it makes it all maybe feel a little more like surreal and weird and funny, like seeing an actual, like for this. And I was wondering the whole time watching the movie if that was part of what was disconnecting for me, is that the normal, weird, quirky funness of like Wes Anderson didn't feel like it translated in the performances in the same way when we have this stop motion. Like I felt like this weird disconnect between what I was supposed to feel watching the scenes versus what I was actually feeling, because of we're watching clay stop motion puppets or whatever. Yeah. And I was wondering if maybe that was part of the problem.
No, I think that's a valid point. I think you lose, like animation is great, and I love animation, and don't get me wrong, and animation can totally be very emotive.
Well, and stop motion can be like all of Laika's films. Like I said, Kubo and Shoestrings in particular, I think does a fantastic job of it. My point specifically is about the style of humor and oddballness in a Wes Anderson movie. I don't know if that works.
No, I think maybe you're right. I haven't, because Isle of the Dogs is his only other stop motion animated one, right? And I haven't seen that one either. But I mean, maybe in order to work his kind of style and that kind of quirky, weird comedy thing, maybe it does need live action.
That's what I was wondering.
Maybe you need the actor there as like a buffer to make it work.
That's what I was wondering, and that's what it felt like to me, because there are moments that I laughed and chuckled out loud at this movie, but it wasn't as much as I would normally laugh at, I think, at a Wes Anderson movie like Bottle Rocket or something. I remember finding quite hilarious, and this one, and that was a different time, and I was found different things funny, I'm sure, but still, it just felt very Royal Tenenbaums. I think it's a really hilarious movie. I haven't seen either of those in a long time, but But yeah, it was just very strange to me, and I wondered if that maybe had something to do with it.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's a good thesis, potentially.
And then finally, do they end up living in a sewer and stealing from a grocery store?
Kind of, not really. No, but the ending of the movie and the ending of the book do sort of end up in the same place, because they do, at the end of the book, ultimately decide to stay underground. But they're in the tunnels and not like in the sewer, and they're stealing from the farms and not a grocery store. So like, yes, but no.
Yes, but no.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So yeah, they kind of wanted to go with the same idea of an ending, but they wanted they wanted a third act.
Right. They needed to build off of what was like, this book is, let me just see. This book is 81 pages. It has very large print and lots of illustrations.
Yeah.
I think potentially an important thing to remember with the book and with how like spare and simple it is that this did start as like a bedtime story that he told to his kids.
Yeah. And that's fair. Because I thought about that, and when I was thinking, and as I was watching the movie, and as I've been reflecting on it and thinking about how sort of annoyed I was that I felt like it wasn't saying anything. I fully admit and understand that stories don't always have to say something. Like they can just be a fun story for kids about a thieving fox. Like it doesn't have to say anything. It just feels like, especially when you're adapting a movie.
I think if you're going to adapt it and you're going to take it and you're going to try to make it better and elevate it, then it needs to say something. Needs to say something.
I feel like a 50-page or whatever, 30-page kids book doesn't necessarily have to have a suit. Like, not all of them. Some of them need to, and a lot of them do.
I mean, this one...
And obviously Roald Dahl does in other things.
This is, I think, an outlier for Roald Dahl, because if you look at stuff like Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, those all have very clear messages and positive messages as well. Yeah. And this one is just kind of like a fun, short little romp.
Right. And I guess, you know what? I guess kudos to the movie in regards that it does reflect that to some extent. That it doesn't. Yeah. I guess you could argue that it is a good thing that it doesn't inject some sort of message that...
Depending on what you're looking for.
You know what I mean? Like,
it doesn't accurately reflect that from the book.
It does inject a bit of a message, like we talked about with the whole differences making a stronger thing. And that's, I like that message. I just don't think the message is done well, particularly.
No, I agree.
I just don't think it delivers in a way that's like satisfying in the movie. But you could argue that, the fact that they don't go in and like turn Fantastic Mr. Fox into a critique of capitalism or something is like, there are elements of that in the movie at times with, sort of the farming industry and that sort of thing. There are definitely elements of it, but they don't lean hard into it, and which to me is just lazy and boring. Like when you don't lean into any of that, I'm trying to go at it from two sides. One, cool, they didn't put their own spin on Roald Dahl's story. They didn't go in and be like, this is about capitalism and how it's horrible. But like, do something. Like, do something with your movie. Don't just. I don't know.
No, that one's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah. It just. I just wish that it did something, and I felt like it didn't. All right, that's it for. Was that in the book? And Brian rants. Probably not done with that part yet, but. I'm really truly interested to hear what people have to say about this movie. If you liked it or if you didn't like it, I want to know why or why not, because I wanted to like it and it didn't do it. But so please express if you're like, oh, I love it because of this and because I got this message out of it, because I felt this way about it. Or if you're just like, I loved it because it was kind of fun and looked cool. Like, that's fine too. And I get that. It did look cool and it was kind of fun. But I want to know.
No, I think you've made a valid point that, like, you are definitely the kind of person who wants there to be a message.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody else who isn't looking for that would have a cool, fun time watching this movie.
Yeah. And I'm not saying there has to be a super overt message, because, like, I loved Avengers Endgame overall. And that movie doesn't have... it has messages. It has things it's saying throughout, but it doesn't have like an overt, like deep like super impactful message that like when I walked out of Avengers Endgame, I was like, man, I really got to reflect on some Marvel movies have more than others, colonialism and stuff in Black Panther, and they all comment on different things, and Avengers Endgame does comment on things, but I can go into a movie and just be like, cool, let's watch some cool stuff happen, but I also need to identify or care about the characters at all, which in this one I felt like I didn't, because I didn't like George Clooney. His son was kind of interesting, but okay. Like I felt like there was nothing for me to latch on to in this movie to get me through it in terms of like what I liked about it, other than like visually it's kind of neat looking, but also it's not as gorgeous as a Leica film. It's not even close, and it's not as interesting stop motion as like Mary and Max, which is all this it's like all black and white with like sparse color, and is a very interesting, distinct style. This one is kind of somewhere in between, and it just looks like a Wes Anderson movie with puppets. And it's like, I get it. I get it. And it's kind of cool. It's cool. Anyways, I thought we ended the Brian Rant segment. Boy, did we not.
I feel like every segment might be Brian Rant's segment.
I'm going to try not to so we can get this thing done with. Let's talk about Lost in Adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
Yeah, let's.
So, this was weird. I need you to explain this to me. In this movie, there's the scene where the rat dies. So the rat has been working for the farmer and has betrayed his species. I don't even know.
His kind?
His
I don't
kind,
know.
which was a weird message again.
Yeah.
Weird messaging.
If we looked at it in a lefty anti-capitalist kind of way, we could say he's betrayed
his class,
the working
class.
class.
The working class, and that's fair. And that I thought maybe it was kind of what they're going for, but it doesn't. It just does. None of it's written in any way that's succinct enough to deliver on
it doesn't really. We can try to look at it through a bunch of different lenses, but none of them really pan out.
None of them really pan out in any way that's
the
satisfying, which is what's super frustrating about it. Is that like I can kind of find little bits here and there of every different way to look at sort of different elements of it and kind of reflect on it in that way, but none of them pan out in a way that makes me go, yeah, that's probably what they were going for. I'm just like, maybe? I don't... But anyways, so he's working for the farmers as a security, and at one point at the end of the movie, he fights the fox, but ends up dying by getting electrocuted, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Because he gets electrocuted, we see in that fight scene, and then he's dying on the ground, and they come over to him, and as he's dying, he gasps. He tells them that
he's like, all I wanted was cider.
Yeah, all I wanted was cider, and he also tells them where the kid is.
Yeah.
He says, all I wanted was cider, and this definitely feels, like you said, a little bit of a leftist critique of like him betraying all money, the cider, kind of, it's gold, it's, I get it, and he says it's literally liquid gold. So like I get sort of that element of it. I think there's I can't even get into like all the layers of weird leftist critique of this in terms of like the problematic element of like, yes, there's too much there to digest, and that is interesting, and I think there's stuff to talk about, but it's also potentially problematic because you could also read this as I think you could read this as a weird like know your place proletariat. Mm-hmm. And you're the proletariat, stay the proletariat, live underground, be happy there.
Yeah. No. Yeah, the messages
you know what
are
I mean?
a little bit conflicting.
That's what I mean. That's what drives me insane about this movie is that I feel like because if you try to rise above but they don't even smash this. If they broke the system, which maybe that's when they started firebombing shit. I was like, all right, movie, let's see where you're going with this.
The wheel.
Are we going to break the wheel? But they don't break the wheel. They just live under the wheel and steal from it eventually, and every now and then. And I was like, I don't understand what your message is. I don't get it. Okay. All right. Anyways.
I kind of wish we were filming right now. Like I a little bit wish
anybody who watches Good, Bad, or Bad knows what I look like right now.
Yeah,
so.
you know exactly what he looks like right now.
But anyways, so getting back to my point about the rat. As he's dying, he says, I just want to taste that cider. And they go, oh, well, luckily there's some right here. And they scoop what appears to be sewage. Again, they're in the sewer. up in their hands and feed it to him, and he goes, that's the stuff or whatever, and then dies. And now again, I know this isn't in the book. No. So this is a lost in adaptation in terms of like, let's try to figure this out.
What were they going for?
Did they feed him actual sewage in that moment?
I guess so. I mean,
is it supposed to be
like
funny?
They did. Maybe.
Is it supposed to be sad?
Maybe.
Is the message that sewage can taste like cider if
you're dead?
Dying?
If you've been electrocuted and all your taste buds are dead?
And then, like, I get the idea in that scene is like, oh, they're giving him his let's just placate him as he's dying. But they literally, like, couldn't somebody have just had some water or something? It feels weird because here's the thing about this movie is in this moment, they're trying to, like, give us an emotional reaction. This is supposed to be a somewhat emotional scene in the sense of, like, he's felt like he's betrayed. He has this moment of redemption. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to feel at least something because he tells them where the kid is being hid, and this is sort of a redemption moment for him. And they even say that explicitly in the movie about like he had this moment of redemption. But then in that moment, they feed him sewer water.
Right.
And tell him it's cider, and I don't get if that's supposed to be funny or what I'm supposed to get out of that scene. It feels like everything. I just don't get it.
I can't help you with this one.
All right.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, that's fine. Moving on. If the sewage thing was sewage, was it actually sewage that they fed him, or was it just supposed to be like murky looking water? But to me, it looked like sewage. And if it was sewage, what am I supposed to feel in that scene? Tell me how I'm supposed to feel watching that scene. Am I supposed to laugh, but then immediately be sad, but then also feel happy that he redeemed himself? Or am I supposed to just laugh and move on? Or am I not supposed to care and not think about it because it's just a silly movie? Like what? Anyways.
Your next
this
question
next thing is just everything we've been talking about for the last hour. Which is, what is this about? Like, what's the message? Survival, finding happiness in bad situations. Was this? I legitimately didn't know when this was written because I don't know when Roald Dahl was prolific or whatever. And I was like, was this written for wartime kids? Because that was the thing that made the most sense to me. If this story was written for children living in like war-torn, war-bombed out like London during the Blitz or something, and they're like living underground, like living in their basement, and like, we can be happy down here together, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I was like, okay, at least that if in that context, that kind of makes sense to me. At least where they were going for.
It was published in the 70s.
So no.
Well,
I guess the Cold War.
Cold War, yeah,
a little, but it's
potentially.
a little nah. Yeah.
But maybe it was an idea that he had conceived of earlier. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because it was a story that he said he told to his kids. So, and I don't know like exactly what that timeline looks like of like when his kids were very young. You know versus when he actually wrote this down and published it.
When you say that, a story he told to his kids makes perfect sense for this story in the sense of like if I'm making up a story to tell to my kids, I'm not thinking of like thematically.
No,
you know what I mean?
No.
I'm doing an A to B to C to D. Yeah. These are things that happened. There was a fox. Yeah. He was a hungry fox. He lived in a hole.
By the seats of our pants.
He lived in a hole under a tree. One day he saw these 3 farmers across the street, and he was hungry, so he decided he was going to break into each of their farms and steal their products or whatever. And then so he goes to the first farm and he steals their chickens, and they're delicious. And he goes to the second. Like, sure, that makes perfect sense. But then. So I guess wish I could go back in time and have somebody sit me down before I watch this movie and go, there's no point. And I'd be like, all right, let's do it. Like,
do you want me to start telling you when the book doesn't have a point so that you're prepared?
I would want to know before going into the movie that the movie doesn't have a point. or doesn't have an interesting message. Again, I'm not saying for anybody who loves this movie it's not. There are messages, there are moments of interesting thematic stuff throughout the movie at times, but none of them really go anywhere satisfying for me. And never really, or they either don't go anywhere satisfying, or they get to somewhere satisfying without any of the setup to make them satisfying. So, anyways, all right. That's enough Lost in Adaptation. Let's go on to Better in the Book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
Okay, cool. My 3 segments.
Sorry.
We can
I'll try to
speed through these.
I'll try to stop talking.
All right.
I didn't want this. I wanted it to be a nice, fun episode about how delightful this movie was.
So did I. But alas. Okay. Better in the Book. Better in the Book sometimes is complaints about the movie. That is kind of the case this time. I only have a couple points under each of my segments. So the movie gimmick where they like suddenly become animalistic is like a little bit weird to me. I didn't quite understand what the movie was trying to convey to me through that.
Oh, boy.
So-
Just add that to the list of I don't get what you're trying to make me feel, Wes Anderson. What am I supposed to feel? Sorry.
I just didn't really get it. Yeah. I mentioned this earlier. The movie has this conceit that he was supposed to have like given up stealing and then he starts again. And that's definitely like, I think, a more fleshed out version of events than what the book does. But it is like kind of a big part of the story that he's been consistently robbing these guys for years.
Right.
Which I feel like makes their reaction make a little bit more sense.
Yeah. Yeah, because in the movie they just get robbed once and they're like, we're burning it all down. We're gonna murder all of these animals.
Right. We're just gonna destroy everything because this fox took a couple of our chickens.
Yeah.
But like in the book, it's like he goes out every night and he steals from them.
Yeah, this is like slow burn build of them.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
We have to do something.
Rat's death scene, weird, not in the book. Didn't care for it. And then the aside scene with the wolf, which I didn't understand the point of, aside from being like kind of amusing, maybe. I didn't know what the message was.
This is the thing. Again, I'm not going to go off for too long, but this is the thing. That's exactly it. I didn't know
what the message was, and I didn't know how it connected to anything else.
I'm usually pretty good at sussing that stuff out. I feel like we're both usually pretty good at that. I
have 2 English degrees.
Yes, you have 2 English degrees. I have a film degree. We've watched lots of movies, read lots of books. We've had lots of in-depth discussions about thematic elements and stories. It was the entire point of our Harry Potter series, and what we talked about is the thematic elements in that series and what the movies got wrong. It's all of the meta content that we consume about media is people commenting on thematic and all of the meaningful elements of stories, and so it's something we're really keyed into and focus on. And when we can't suss out what the point is or what the message is or what the meaning or what I'm supposed to be feeling in this moment, it feels like a failure of the filmmaker. And now you can be like, oh, it's supposed to be ambiguous, and that can be fine. And there are times where that can work. But again, I would want to reiterate, this is supposed to be a kid's movie to some extent. This is a kid's story. This is kind of a kid's movie. That shouldn't be... I shouldn't go into that expecting some weird, ambiguous, impossible to suss out thematic elements that I'm like, what is the point of this?
Right. Well, and the thing to me is that, like, not everything has to have, like we said, not everything has to have this, like, grand message or overarching point. I understand that, and I'm not saying that everything does. What bothered me more so was that I didn't understand how a lot of these different little elements connected. Yeah. Like, I don't get how the scene with the wolf and, like, him being afraid of wolves connected to anything else.
Anything else. Or even his character.
Yeah.
Like, so let's try to just to dive down on that a little bit, that specific example, just a little bit. So throughout the movie, he comments about how he's afraid of wolves, right? Numerous times he's scared of wolves because he keeps thinking the Kylie or whatever will say like wolf or whatever. He'll be like, wolves? Who's talking? What? Why are there wolves? What? And he's clearly scared of wolves. And if the movie had if his character had some sort of overarching plot or thematic element of him overcoming fear or something, then that would make sense. So if the plot somehow tied into Fox overcoming his fear,
right,
then the wolf thing would make. Now, I guess maybe you could try to maybe argue that the plot is about Fox overcoming his fear of being what's the word?
Like not special?
Not special or not recognized, of being unimportant or whatever.
Right.
Not unimportant necessarily is the right word, but being sort of meaningless or whatever. And so he's stealing chickens to feel more alive, and he wants to move above ground to have a higher stature and to sort of be more interesting. And that and so those are kind of those are more subtle manifestations of his fear, whereas the wolf is a legitimate, concrete, literal manifestation of his fear, and thus him not being scared of the wolf at the end is showing us as the viewers that he has overcome his fears in general. It just feels like that's a real wishy-washy read of the messaging of this movie. Like, I feel like I had to really
It feels like a reach.
It feels like a reach. And again, I shouldn't have to reach in a story. I feel like I shouldn't have to reach for something like that in a story that's for kids. That's for, again, I keep saying it's for kids, but it kind of is for kids. They shouldn't, because they're not going to remotely suss that out.
No.
And so, anyways. So maybe that's what the wolf's about. I was just trying to do something with it and be like, maybe that is what they're going for there. But anyways, that was all you had for better in the book.
Yeah.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
Let's talk about better in the movie.
Better in the movie, I liked that we got a little bit of background story for Mr. and Mrs. Fox. Thought that was cute.
Yeah.
I liked that we met up with the other forest animals before the story proper really started. Because in the book, it's just the foxes until they get underground and then they start running into other people.
Yeah.
Animals. The fox versus human, 2 years, 12 fox years. Yeah. I thought that was cute. I mentioned that the movie doubled down on the idea of it being like a heist.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good addition.
That was when it was most fun to me.
Yeah.
But
expanded the story quite a bit. The movie gives this a third act. I mentioned that the book stops when they're having their feast underground. And I don't probably not agree with every decision that the movie made. But I think pushing it past just the animals digging up underneath the farms probably makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think so too.
And then the addition of some of the named cubs, Ash and Christopherson, the dynamic between them and Mr. Fox fleshes out the characters. Again, not sure I agree with every decision that they made there, but it is more fleshed out and a little more interesting.
Yeah. All right, that was it for better in the movie. Let's move on to the movie. Nailed it.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
The introductions of the farmers, Bogus, Bunce, and Bean, they're still all almost verbatim from the book.
Yeah, I kind of had a feeling in that moment. It felt like
felt very Roald
like
Dahl.
This is from this felt like Roald Dahl. Felt like it was right out of a book.
And then the children's little creepy song about the farmers, which was stuck in my head all night.
Oh yeah.
Is from the book.
That's from the intro of the movie, right?
Yeah.
The big opening of the movie before the opening credits.
They show it on the screen, and then later on they Badger plays a tune of it.
Yeah.
Mr. Fox losing his tail. All the digging. The farmers, they start digging with shovels, and then they bring the terrible tractors, and the foxes have to dig to get away. And then the farmers, like, completely and utterly destroying the landscape in order to try and catch him is directly from the book. And then I mentioned this, but, like, despite, like, that extra third act and a lot of, like, the deviations that the movie takes, it doesn't end dissimilarly to the book. They still decide to just live underground because they have this free access to a massive store of food. And at the end of the book, the farmers are just sitting around waiting for them to come back up.
All right. Yeah.
So that's the same.
What about the...
Mostly.
Do you have
Did I miss something?
No. I just thought you had a mention about the art style in general being like...
Oh, I have something about that in my final
Oh,
verdict.
okay. I thought I remember reading something about that. All right, that's it for the movie Nailed It. We have a few little things to talk about in odds and ends, so we'll do that before we get to the final verdict.
Do we want to, like, talk about the art a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually completely agree with your note about this movie makes me feel like autumn. I was like, well, because it's purely
all, like,
autumnal.
Yeah, it's all those autumnal colors.
Yeah, and they there's their moment where they're preparing for the feast very much felt like a Thanksgiving or Halloween. They have, like, it's not holly, but they have some sort of plants hung, garlandy plants hung up on the ceiling and that sort of thing. And it very much felt like this movie would be one of those ones they would play around Thanksgiving time.
Yeah. It looked like whenever they were outside, it looked like it was kind of crisp and cool, but, like, still sunny.
Yeah. And
like
I did
nice
wonder,
autumn day.
I legitimately wondered if I would have liked this movie more if we watched it in the fall.
Maybe we should try it again.
legitimately thought that might be, like, a factor. If, like, because I'm, like, just hot and miserable and, like, all day. And then if it was a nice crisp fall day and I watched this movie, I'd be like, yeah. Feels great.
You know what? I think we should try it again.
I 100% think we should watch this movie again. I felt the same way.
Here's what I think we should do. And you guys can offer your support of this.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear any naysayers. I think we should, on a nice crisp fall day, we should have a picnic.
Okay.
And we should eat, like, cheese and grapes and things like that. And, like,
and
a
apple
loaf
cider.
of crusty bread. And watch this, like, outside.
I agree. Again, maybe then I would be in a cheerful fall mood. I wasn't in a bad mood when we watched this movie. I was in a fine mood.
Like
I wasn't. Like I said, I didn't, like, go into this movie, like, in a bad mood or anything. It just... but I do wonder if seasonally, like, again, like, I enjoy A Christmas Story more during Christmas.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, during that time of year, I do wonder if I watch this. And no, it's not explicitly a Thanksgiving or even a fall or whatever movie, but
right, but it does have that.
It does have the vibe
feel to it.
And so maybe I would like it more that time of year. So we'll have to try that in a few months, maybe.
I was wondering the fight scene between Fox and Rat, which was done in, like, still frame
with
flashes,
the lights flashing.
And I'm wondering if that was, like, a strategic choice, because surely it's easier to do something like that in stop motion than to animate a whole fight.
I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was stylistically, because that happens, as a filmmaker. There's definitely something you'll do is you'll there are a lot of times there are happy accidents, and maybe not accidents, but there are happy little things that'll happen while you're trying to come up with a way to do something easier or quicker or more efficiently. Mm-hmm. And that can sometimes turn into an interesting and cool stylistic choice that works well. This one may have just been it, and sometimes it can go both directions, where you can do something that stylistically you think is going to look really cool, and it turns out, oh, this is actually also going to make it a lot easier to do this than if we just animated the whole fight. Or other times you might be like, oh, boy, what's a way we could do this fight scene that is going to save us a lot of time?
Yeah.
Oh, what if, like, the lights are flashing and we only see parts of it? And I think it works in this movie overall. And so, but sometimes that can be an obvious shortcut. I don't think it felt like an obvious shortcut or like an obvious cheat in this movie. I felt like it fit in very well, just kind of overall with the style.
I don't think it stuck out or anything. It was just something that I thought of.
Yeah,
while we were
it definitely would make it. It's definitely an easier, cheaper way to animate a fight scene is to only see 8 frames of it instead of 100 or 50 or whatever.
Frames.
Yeah, instead of 150 or whatever.
Oh, and then you had a note about the smoke from the fires.
I thought the smoke from the fire was really cool.
Yeah, it looked cool.
It's like cotton.
Yeah, it looked like cotton.
But the way they animated it coming up, and I was like, how in the world did they do that? Like, it looks so cool. And I know it's stop motion, they're just pulling and it's
pulling
like
and rolling it.
Moving it. And yeah, I get it. But it was super cool. And I was like super on board with anytime anything caught on fire. I was like super stunned by that visually.
You know what that kind of made me think of? Like that specific instance when you could like kind of tell what it was made out of.
Yeah.
The I Spy books.
Yeah.
When they would do like scenes.
Yeah.
I loved those books.
I watched a really interesting documentary about the guy that made those, who took the pictures. It's fascinating.
Did you watch this without
It
me?
wasn't a full documentary. It was like a 10-minute YouTube video or something, but it was fascinating.
Send it to me.
No, I didn't realize you loved the I Spy books, but there's like a 10-minute documentary about the guy who made them and about how he staged
pretty
them.
dope.
And, yeah, it's cool. He makes his own book series now. That's the same thing, but it's just a different name or something like that.
Do we need to talk about
I don't think we need to talk about any of this other stuff because we mentioned it all.
We got a lot of this.
Yeah,
I did kind of want to know where the small motorcycle came from because that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But I guess it doesn't matter.
It's funny.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. That was the least of my concerns where that stupid little small motorcycle came from. But all right, that was it for odds and ends. We're going to get to the final verdict. Katie, what do you think?
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
So I'm finding myself torn here. I don't really want to give it to one or the other because I had different issues with both the book and the movie. My main issue with the book is that it's kind of sparse and boring. Like, there's just not much to it. Now, to be totally fair, I didn't read this book as a kid, so I don't have any fond childhood memories of it. I did try to imagine what young Katie would have thought of it, and honestly, I still think I would have been pretty unsatisfied. I was an early reader to the shock of probably no one, and I was reading like more complex stories with more fleshed out worlds more quickly, so I skipped a lot of like quote-unquote beginner type stuff. So I did read books about anthropomorphic animals, but like it was Redwall.
Yeah.
Okay. My main issue with the movie, aside from everything else we talked about, was that I felt like it focused on style over substance, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think it can become so when you don't just go with it and instead try to shoehorn in a theme or a message at the end without taking the time to build those through lines. I feel like that's what happened here, and to me, that comes off as sloppy storytelling. And I think that's a shame because I actually do think that Wes Anderson's like aesthetic is kind of perfect for a Roald Dahl book.
If you just take still frames from this movie,
perfect,
great. It's a beautiful movie. I'm not dissing the
I think his
style.
style emphasizes that like storybook aspect of it because of the way that the shots are set up.
Yeah, for sure.
And it also like it looks just a teeny bit kooky and like off without totally misunderstanding Dahl's original mood and aesthetic, like some other Dr. Seuss movies that we could talk about.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to make a decision when you feel kind of equally unenthusiastic about both the book and the movie. I think I am going to give it to the movie because at least the movie had interesting visuals. But please understand that I have no strong feelings about this one way or the other. So my apologies, Fantastic Mr. Fox stands. It just wasn't my bottle of cider.
There you go. Yeah, that was This one was weird. I don't have a lot else to say. I'm not gonna. Everything you said it perfectly in your final verdict. I want to reiterate again for any of the fans out there, because I know people were excited about this. I don't want you guys to feel like we're just shitting on this movie. No,
it just wasn't for us.
It just didn't do anything for me.
And maybe, like you said, like maybe we just approached it the wrong way.
Maybe
and
it's
like
possible.
Wanting to like look for a message, and maybe that's not what this is about. Maybe there's not really a message there. But it just didn't do anything for either of us.
To me, when I'm gonna watch a 90-minute movie, it doesn't have to have like some overarching huge message, but I've talked about this numerous times, but there's things in a movie that when the sum of the parts, so you have all these different elements of a movie that start adding up, and eventually once all of those things get enough, once the levels of each of these different elements get high enough, I'm like, this is a good movie and I like this. And so those elements are different things like the acting, cinematography, the art style, the music, the action sequences, the jokes, the comedy, and then the thematic storytelling, the themes, the messages. Is it saying anything interesting? All of those different, and there's even more, but those are just,
Could you perhaps make a bar chart for us?
You could. So all of those different things, but it wouldn't be a bar. So all of those different things, and once one of those things can be really low. Like if your cinematography could be pretty freaking low, but if your actors' performances are incredible and the thematic message is incredible, then I can think this is an amazing movie still, even if the cinematography, and I could list off a million different examples that have different things that are balanced this way and that about what I think makes a really good movie in terms of like the different things and balanced all over the place. This one, the only thing that was above the line of what got to a good movie for me was the visual style, was the cinematography, quote unquote, the way the movie looked. That alone, again, playing this movie with sound off, cool. This is beautiful. This is really neat to look at. I'm enjoying this. But every other element of the storytelling to me fell completely flat. So there
you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's it for this episode of This Film Is Lit. As always, you can follow us and berate us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Goodreads if you completely disagreed, which I saw, I think it was Shelby. Somebody commented, and never has a comment been more prophetic, potentially. I think it was Shelby commented on Twitter that I have a feeling this one's going to be divisive.
Yeah.
And that was before we watched the movie, or before I watched it, because I was like, really?
Shelby, #1 fan, knows us better than we know ourselves.
I was like, really? Is it going to be divisive? I feel like we're going to be like, wow, what a cute movie. That was fun. Oh, the movie's slightly better because it's cool, because it looks neat. Like, but holy cow, because again, I guess I didn't know anything about this movie. Critically, it looked like it had great reviews. Oh, IMDb, it's like okay. It's got like a 7 point something. So maybe there is some like diversity of opinion there that's kind of pulling it more towards a 7 as opposed to like an 8 or something. But anyways, I wasn't expecting that, or the reaction I had, or the reaction we had in general, and I'm really interested to see everybody else's reaction.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out.
We'll find out. So
we'll have them polls up in a day or two.
All the social medias, let us know what you think about our opinions on this. If you could do us a favor, rate and review us. Maybe not based on this episode, potentially. Depending on how you feel. Or if you loved it. If you hated Fantastic Mr. Fox, you might love this episode. If you're like, I've been waiting 10 years for somebody to come at Fantastic Mr. Fox, you may go give us that 5-star review. This may be your lucky day. But otherwise, maybe wait it out until we get to an episode where we're a little more positive. But anyways, you can do that on iTunes or anywhere else you listen to us. Katie, what's up next?
All right. So up next, I had planned for us to do It to coincide with the Part 2 movie coming out. And as it turns out, I don't have time to read it.
It's like 1,000 pages.
It's a 1,000-page book. So apologies to anyone who saw that on Goodreads, to our 10 Goodreads followers. Yeah. And we're maybe looking forward. We're not going to do it. But
at least not now.
Yeah, not now. I am substituting it out with a different Stephen King. We are going to do Children of the Corn.
Ooh, we haven't done a horror movie in a while.
Yeah, we haven't.
The last one we did was
also Stephen King. It was Pet Sematary,
which we also hated.
Which was horrible.
Yeah, we also hated that movie.
But so did a lot of other people.
Yeah, that one was less controversial opinion probably. But all right.
So that's a short story. So I'm hoping it will not be too bad of a read.
Yeah.
And then we will rent the movie.
Yeah, cool. All right, so Children of the Corn, look out for that one coming out in 2 weeks, and we'll have a prequel episode in between that and now and then. And until that time, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.
Keep being fantastic.
Oh, that's right. You were.
I was going to say that, but then I hated the movie, so it felt like I shouldn't say that.
It felt cheap.
Yeah. Because I would.
I get it.
So, but I said it anyway. So I'm just going to leave all this in, and then
please do.
The episode will end now.